Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jeff. I hope you guys been doing well. I got another kind of story and concept that I wanted to talk through today. And today I want to tell you guys about how the day where I finally realized that I've never ever been good at anything my entire life. And I want to tell you about how that moment was kind of like a really positive tipping point in my journey in becoming a software engineer. This story happens when I was about 22, 23, straight out of college. Again, wasn't successfully able to land a job, and it starts literally on the first couple of days where I start my construction job as a construction worker. I've been talking about this quite a bit, but this idea right here kind of came up after just hanging out with some of my college buddies a couple of days ago back home in Oregon, and we all kind of had some reflections, right? We had some reflections about how just simply dumb we were in college and how little we knew, but we didn't like necessarily know that at the time. And to be able to take that to another level, right? For myself, I just never once had that true reflection or understanding of like what it meant to actually be like an expert or to be really strong at something or have a really strong skill. And I never really added those two things together. But when I did, and luckily I did, things really did turn around for me. And it was a lot of, I can really thank a lot of this, this reflection to keep me kind of in that straight line and becoming the programmer that I am today. And like, again, it was a really big tipping point. And these things are going to kind of sound unrelated, but I promise at the end, I'm going to talk about how and why it ultimately helped me, especially find the motivation to continue programming, learning on my own, and pushing through the journey that I did. Okay, so first, talk about a little bit of background, right? I personally was never somebody that thought I was bad at anything, right? And what I mean by this was that even though it's crazy to say, but even though I got cut from a bunch of basketball teams and sports teams in my high school years, got terrible grades my entire life, like a 1.0 in college, that kind of thing. I never thought of myself as being bad, right? That wasn't anything clear to me because, as a young kid, I always kind of been able to find alternative reasonings to kind of make up for the gaps that I ultimately had, or the performances that I had, like performances as in, taking a final and bombing it and not getting through, right? I always thought about like how if I did certain things or if these certain things didn't happen or if I would have took a different amount of classes or if I took a different subset of courses at one time or if I took this class in a different semester. Or in sports, it was even harder in sports because looking back, right, everybody was very close in skill level. And what I mean by like close is like when you're playing in a small town, being good might mean you're like 5% better than your peers, but it's like nowhere near being, able to get you a college scholarship or especially play the pros. So I always had this way of thinking about how, like, man, I got cut from this team, but I'm not bad because even the best player is only this good. I could get there if I did X, Y, and Z things. And so I always had this thought that, even if I didn't make a certain score or make a certain team or make a certain bar, I always thought that I knew what I was doing or I knew that I could possibly get there. And that's kind of like the mindset that I had moving forward throughout like my 20s and my early teens. And I wouldn't say that this was a cocky attitude. Like if you look at this, it's like you might think that I was maybe this like super cocky kid and high ego type person, but I don't think I was. I think that I've always been pretty level headed, but it was more of kind of like I kind of more used that as a defense mechanism or a self reflection that kept me away from thinking I sucked at life and I sucked at everything I did, which I didn't quite, I always viewed that. I always view being bad at something as like the ultimate kind of negative thing in life, right? Like there's no way that, I'm bad at things. And as a person that can read, write, go through the transitions, be able to talk to people normally, even in my younger years. It's like it was a really, really hard acceptance to think that I was like not good at certain things, right? Like no matter what it can be as a human, I personally just thought that even if I wasn't good at it then, I wasn't bad at it because I could figure it out. And so I really had grasped that mindset throughout my entire life. And I didn't truly understand. And more importantly, I truly didn't understand what it meant to get good at something or be very, very good at something, right? Maybe a little bit of a small town mentality, but I think that's ultimately where I was at. So the day that I truly stumbled upon and realized how bad I was the day that I started my construction job. My construction job was a whole nother beast. And to give you a little bit of background, I was like just fresh out of college again. I almost thought could have done better, right? Like fresh out of college. And another funny part that I wanted to mention to you about not realizing how bad I was that at that point, my resume was so garbage. My best skill was probably the fact that I went to college, and the college, the aura and the persona of what it meant to go to a college, right? And not to add on top of that, I went to, like, I didn't go to Harvard or something like that. I went to a very average school, like average American large high college. And it's like, that was the best thing on my resume, was the fact that I have a college degree on my resume. Literally nothing, right? Like my other skills include working work study jobs. I think I put some course projects on there. And looking back, like now that I'm a staff engineer, it wasn't like some technical skill that I knew or some true like thing that I implemented out into this world. It was just Excel, some class projects that I did, some work study that I did, and my college degree. That was literally what my resume was. But again, right, like I don't think I was necessarily, I never thought I was like the best person in the world. I had a good standing of where I stood, but I didn't think that I was at the end of being really bad at something, right? Like, because I always was able to level out, find a reason to level myself at least towards the middle. So going into this, right, doing a construction job, something I didn't want to do. First day on the job, very first day on the job, they give me a truck. They give me a 25-foot ladder or a 20-foot ladder that can extend another like 15 feet, like literally 2 stories high, commercial grade, 100 pounds rated, not one of your little home step ladders. Like this thing literally towers over you. A roof rack, a ladder rack for your truck, bunch of tools that I didn't know how to use, and off I go, right? And the reason why I came to this realization was because I personally didn't think that I was going to be this bad at this job. I thought just like college, just like playing sports, playing video games, I could figure it out along the way. And I thought I could at least figure it out quickly, right? But that was not the case. The moment I stepped onto for the first time ever, the moment that I stepped onto any construction site, I was literally a hired hazard. Like I was hired on and I was a hazard and I was a cost negative to the company for months on end. Like literally I was like the guy that could potentially step through a bad spot on the roof, hold the ladder wrong and, drop it on myself, hurt my back. Like I was like literally walking on the site every day for months on end. And I was like that person that was such a negative to the team. And every moment was a test. It was like a final test. And it wasn't practice anymore. Like this wasn't a practice exam, day in, day out. And the training essentially was doing the job, right? Like, yes, there was training, but you were still mocking the job as closely as you possibly can to the job. And I guess I just personally have never been out in the fire that close, to put it in another sense. And so there I was, right? Like as someone that's like really, that's into cars and someone that's pride myself as being, I like to be outside using tools, working on things, right? I never thought that I didn't even know how to drive well. That even hit myself hard, right? Like I used to have like this cool little sports car and that I was like this great driver, Fast and Furious style, never got in an accident. But it's not until you jump into like a truck, you have all your equipment you have a ladder that you need to make sure it's strapped down properly going on the highway and that it can't just fly off and hit the car behind you. It wasn't until I had to maneuver construction sites, drive my car basically in places that most cars wouldn't even make. It's like I realized like, oh shoot, there's a whole nother tier and level to a lot of the things that I thought I was good at. And I truly didn't even know there was another level to it. It was like, you think everybody thinks they can like fasten a screw into the wall until you have to fasten 1,000 of them, on the job site. Or everybody thinks they can climb a ladder until you have to carry around a 50-pound commercial grade ladder that's 8 times your height and be able to not slip and fall on a rainy day, right? Like that kind of thing. And that was the test. That was the every single daily test. I always tell this to folks, right? It was like, I couldn't even get on to the construction site because I had to put my ladder on the side of the house or the commercial building, that kind of thing. That alone was like a final, because if I didn't pass that test that day, I would fall off the roof. And it was kind of one of those things that's kind of funny. Like even putting up that ladder on the side of the house, it's like there's days where we got an F on the test. I've had the ladder fall off the roof after I've gotten on. Someone had to pick it up for me. There's days where I got a C, and the C was like an instant reflection of the grade. A C was like, I barely made it up and I might have, slipped a little bit, or the ladder slid back like an inch or something like that, or like a foot as I was climbing up. So it's all those funny things that it's like I was just being tested every day. And it was the first time I was seeing my skill level being tested and realizing that I was like, my original skill level was literally the base default level. Like I knew how to drive, but only as well as like being on the highway when there's no crazy conditions, that kind of stuff. I knew how to use a ladder only at my house to, change a light bulb, that kind of thing, right? So that's what it was. It was a interesting experience, and I'm happy that I was able to reflect on that. And the thing that I loved the most about it that really hit me hard was that there didn't seem like there was any shortcuts to shortcutting that knowledge. The only way to shortcut that knowledge, the only way to learn that knowledge is just to do it every single day. And you're getting tested day in and day out. And I guess passing the test was when like your other peer construction guys stop making fun of you for how stupid you look when you're holding that ginormous ladder, or when you're finally fastening in material to the wall, that kind of stuff correctly. So I guess for the first time ever, it was like for the first time ever, it's like I couldn't just skip some homework or like try to wing the final, or I couldn't compare myself to the other kids on the sports team, I guess. For the first time ever, it was like I either got good at this or not, or I'm going to get hurt on the job site. Like that's what it meant. And there was no like, the homework that I was doing for this was every day, was practicing it every day, day in and day out in front of my other construction worker peers, and accepting that I was going to have to make it up onto the site, whether how stupid or how badly I was going to do it. And there was no hiding in that sense. Like there's just no way to hide. Like you can't just run inside and take the stairs instead of use the ladder, right? So like, again, I mentioned earlier, how does this reflect back onto my coding journey, right? Well, this reflects back really hard. As I was working that in parallel, as I was working that job, that construction job, it made me really think about, like, the only other thing that I had going on in my life was that I wanted to pursue and learn how to program. And even at that point, at my programming journey, I thought that maybe I could learn this in a year, or I can learn this in 6 months, right? But because of how bad I was at my construction job, it made me really reflect back on how bad I probably was at programming. And at that point, I think I had this projection, a false projection of how fast I was going to learn this thing, or how proficient I was at that point. And I just scaled it all really, really far back. Like I thought I was on level 5, but I realized that I was really on level 1. And in that moment, when I realized that dang, I'm like, heck, I wasn't even on level 1. I was probably, if this was a video game, I was still creating the name on my character. That's how far I was behind in my programming journey. Like I was creating the name on my video game, you know, like if you're playing Pokemon, like you're still creating your Pokemon, or you're picking your starter, but I was already projecting how fast or how long it would take me to get to the end, right? Which isn't wrong, but that was in reflection on how personally I thought I was gonna, how quickly I can learn something. And that job really quickly realized that it was gonna take me probably much longer to be able to learn those things. And it also made me look at the topics that I thought I already knew and reflect back on, you know, how deeply did I really truly know those topics. One example that I have is that there was one day, you know, I'm learning the for loop, something really basic, and it legitimately took me 3 months to understand the for loop. Like, I'm not even kidding with you, right? Like, I remember just watching YouTube videos for months at a time, looking at iteration I equals 2, and just like, yes, I understand how to do it when you just have a counter that just iterates 1 up. But once you make it a little bit more complex, once you add in a couple more actions inside your for loop, it's like, did I understand it then? And I think I had that realization because of that realization that I had at my job. I went back and like really dove into my fundamental knowledge of that for loop, and took me months at a time. But I think that because of how my job was going every single day, I realized that was okay, right? Like I think that there was a large hit on my ego, and realizing that I've never truly been good at anything. Maybe I've been good at my level, but I was a beginner, and like maybe I was the best beginner in my town, but I was never even the best of the average, you know? And so I think it was an ego hit, but the first time ever, it didn't discourage me. In fact, it made me for the first time truly understand where I was placed, and made me accept finally that it was going to take me longer than it was going to take my peers, and that I was going to do some catch up, for example, to, you know, learn these things, for example. You know, in some ways, like, you know, I hope that made sense, but in some ways, I think that's okay for some things, right? Like we all do this. We're all guilty of, like, for example, whenever I go watch a Oregon Ducks football game, I'm screaming in the bleachers, yelling at players like, why didn't you make this pass, or make, you know, this throw, or whatever it may be. And I think there's all fun and games into that. And it's kind of a reflection, like, of course, you know, I couldn't have made that throw, or I wouldn't have made that catch, right? But there's a lot of times where we do that. And I think the dangerous part is when you do that and you can't have that reflection on things you want to be good at. And it's not only just when you're learning something new in the very beginning. It's even harder when you're later in your career or you're more established. Like, I'll give you an example, right? It's like you're making $100,000, $150,000 late into your career. You have a great title at your job. A lot of times what's stopping you from getting to the even next space is because now you're at a point where you are good at some things, but you still suck at other things. But it's even harder to see that you suck at some of those things and have that reflection when you have you have the history, and you have the awards, and you have the pat on the backs that show you that you are good at something. And that blocks you. And that's something that I want to that's something that I every day continue to try to refine and reflect on, no matter how far I get in my career or where I am at, you know, whatever point in my life, is like this refinement to just get better at those things and truly see what the things you kind of suck at are. And I think even at that point, when I was early in my programming journey, I would say that was even easier at that point. And I'm glad that I had that reflection, because it's like, it was easier to have that reflection because you sucked at everything. Like, I wasn't good at all programming wise. So it wasn't like a thing that I had to like piece out A, B, or C that I wanted to work on. It was just like the whole thing I needed to work on, and I just had to recognize where I truly was at. And so, you know, I'm glad I had that. I really am. And I can see a lot of folks, you know, a lot of folks are stuck on that. A lot of conversations I have it's really hard to be able to break that. But I think the earlier you can and the more you can think about those things, the better you are for it. And I just wanted to be able to share that story a little bit, and I hope that makes sense. So if you have anything for me, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you on the next one. Latest.